Yes, one whistle effectively decided the WNBA Finals. And tonight we're going to prove why that single call at the end of regulation didn't just change a score, it changed a championship. The common belief is simple. If it's a foul, you blow the whistle, even if it's with 5 seconds left in a winner-take-all Game 5. But the better reality, the one backed by game tape, rule interpretation, and the league's own challenge outcome, is that marginal contact was elevated into a title-shifting decision, and the fallout still defines how fans, players, and even NBA stars talk about the WNBA. Here's the plan. First, we'll explain exactly what happened on the decisive play, what the officials saw, what the defense did, and what the rulebook expects. Second, we'll show you why the absence of an official last 2-minute report in the WNBA left a black hole where accountability should be. Third, we'll quantify the moment's impact on win probability and context, and why MVP-caliber performances from both sides got buried under a controversy that never received a transparent audit. We've pulled the official recap and box data, tracked the sequence clock to the 10th, mapped the challenge flow, and cross-checked post-game comments. Let's get into it. Start with the scene. Game 5, the finals, a 2-point Minnesota lead in the final seconds. New York inbounds to their superstar at the top. As she drives, the primary defender meets her square, chest up, hands high, the textbook version of verticality every coach drills into big since high school. The shooter rises, the contest is hard but controlled. The shot misses, and then the whistle comes. A shooting foul. This is the moment that flips the track. 2 free throws tie the game, erase Minnesota's last clean path to a parade, and shove a classic finals into overtime. The Lynx challenge. The review is lengthy. The call stands. 2 makes tie game. That's the box score version, but it hides the core tension. What exactly, by rule and in slow-motion reality, justified labeling that defense illegal? The defender established position early and rose vertically. If there's contact, the question becomes whether she drifted forward into the shooter's cylinder or whether the shooter initiated through the defender's space. If the principle of verticality is the standard, marginal contact is supposed to be a no call in this kind of endgame collision. When that whistle turns on, it's making a judgment about who owned the airspace. And in this case, the judgment carried the weight of a trophy. Why does that matter more than a typical block/charge debate? Because the league had a built-in review moment, the challenge, and after a careful slow-mo look, the same outcome held. In a universe with a transparent post-game audit, that's where an independent check can say, right call, wrong call, or marginal should have stood as called/overturned. But in the WNBA, there is no public last 2-minute report. That means the most disputed whistle of the season never got a formal, itemized accountability receipt that fans, teams, and media could point to. Without a public audit, the debate metastasized into narrative warfare, one side screaming robbery, the other saying a foul is a foul, and no official document to stabilize the truth. That's not an officiating conspiracy, that's a process gap. And when a process gap sits next to a title, the controversy grows roots. Let's keep drilling into the play. Timing matters. With just over 5 seconds left, a foul call in a 2-point game effectively replaces 1 possession of basketball with 2 guaranteed points. Coaches build endgame matrices around that reality. Down 2 with 5 seconds, you typically need a top-tier quick strike or a 3. Tied with 5 seconds, you simply need 1 stop to survive and live in overtime. The whistle did more than reward a player for earning contact. It erased Minnesota's leverage and reset the outcome to a coin flip. Here's the kicker. Even if you believe the contact rose to a legal guarding position, the standard for reversing on challenge is clear and conclusive evidence. If the video shows hands straight up, a squared chest, and collision initiated into the defender's vertical plane, then marginal is the right label. Marginal contact in that situation is usually a swallow-the-whistle moment. That's not fandom, that's how the game is taught and graded. Overtime then becomes the referendum no one asked for. New York hits first blood, an opening 3, then cashes a transition finish off a live ball turnover. Suddenly what was a moral tie at the horn becomes a 5-point mountain for a team that just had its lungs punched. The stats tell you what your eyes feel. The defending team misses their first handful of shots in OT, finally getting on the board late at the line, while the opponent keeps their nose in front on free throws and a late seal-the-deal trip. When you zoom out, the 2 free throws at the end of regulation don't just tie the game. They rearrange the entire psychological landscape of overtime. Instead of needing a bucket to survive, the team that benefited from the whistle only needs competence. And competence is abundant in a roster built for this exact moment. But to really understand the gravity, you have to place it inside the officiating conversation that has stalked the league all season. Coaches have been fined for criticizing calls. Players have used pressers and social media to vent about consistency. The general theme isn't that refs decide games on purpose. It's that the system for correcting and explaining the worst late-game mistakes doesn't exist publicly. The NBA's transparency model, the last 2-minute report, is imperfect and often hated by officials, but it at least places the judgment in writing. Here's the play, here's the rule, here's the grade. The WNBA's choice not to publish L2MS might be a resource issue, but in practice it produces the same outcome. Ambiguity breeds distrust. In the most important game of the year, that ambiguity became the story. Now, was this a one-play championship? No, that would flatten a brilliant, brutally physical series into a single frame. You can't erase the defensive masterpiece that held a superstar guard to a nightmare shooting night. You can't erase the finals MVP who carried possessions on both ends when her co-star's jumper wouldn't fall. You can't erase the 22-point effort from the opposing franchise player, the one who spent the summer living at the line and commanding double teams, only to foul out at the end of overtime after dragging her team through the muck. All of those realities are true and deserve the spotlight. That's exactly why this whistle stings. It overshadowed greatness with ambiguity. We should be debating which big's interior footwork decided the glass battle, which role player's corner 3 bent the scheme, which coach won the ATO duel. Instead, we're here, in a courtroom of slow-mos, litigating a call no one can unblow. Let's answer the first promise. What happened on that possession, and was the call right? Frame by frame, the driver gathers near the free throw line extended. The defender is set outside the semicircle, squared, arms straight. As the shooter elevates, the defender rises vertically and slightly back, absorbing the collision. The contact point is high, hands and forearms meeting ball and wrists. If the defender's torso had slid forward into the shooter's space, or if the hands had come down to chop, that's an easy foul. But the contact reads like a contest with incidental arm-on-arm brush after a ball touch. Enough for a miss without the clear forward displacement that the rulebook looks for when penalizing a vertical contest. In other words, if this play is a foul in the first quarter, we all live with it. If it's marginal, in the last 5 seconds, you live with the miss. Second promise. Why no transparent audit? The WNBA doesn't publish L2M reports. That's it. There's no game-by-game, call-by-call late-game document to confirm, deny, or contextualize bang-bang whistles. Without that, the public only has the on-floor challenge result and the official's pool report if provided. Challenges operate under a high bar, clear and conclusive evidence to overturn. If the replay center or floor crew believes the defender drifted forward by inches, or that high contact disadvantaged the shooter, they'll uphold. But upheld isn't explained, and explained is the difference between outrage and acceptance. If a transparent report came out and said, defender's left forearm contacted the shooter's right forearm prior to the ball release, illegal verticality, correct foul, the debate shrinks. If it said, marginal contact, incorrect whistle, then we have a different debate entirely, one about accountability and process reform. Either way, a report calms the conspiracy factory. Third promise. Did this call actually swing the title? In a 2-point game with 5 seconds left, most win probability models will tell you the leading team is a strong favorite, even after a sideline inbound. Tie that game, and you're in overtime, where home court advantage and depth tend to tilt outcomes. New York scored first in OT and forced Minnesota to play catch-up with cold legs and raw emotion. The final was a 5-point margin. That doesn't happen if the last shot of regulation never gets replaced by free throws. No, it's not a guarantee. Maybe the trailing team still scores, maybe the leader still falters, but when you zoom the camera out, the inflection point is obvious. The whistle replaced a defensive stop with an equalizer and detonated a cascade of consequences that a tired road team couldn't outrun. We should also address the pushback, because it matters. The winning coach pointed out a truism The first score in overtime often decides momentum. She's right. Their role players delivered a hammer, an opening three, and a runout. Their MVP-caliber big sealed it late at the line. If you're in New York's locker room, you can credibly say, "We made the plays." And if you're a neutral ref evaluator, you might argue the defender's upward motion still clipped the shooter's arms before the release. Technically enough to whistle. That's why the presence of an independent, transparent accounting matters so much. Both arguments can be true in the abstract, but the call was specific. Put the judgment in writing. Let the basketball world move forward. There's a final, uncomfortable layer: star gravity. Superstars drive contact. They get downhill, they collapse help, they force split-second choices. Do stars get borderline whistles? In any league, the answer is yes, sometimes. That's not a conspiracy. It's a human tendency amplified by speed and chaos. The antidote is not to swallow the whistle for stars. It's to standardize the threshold and to show your work when the call decides more than a possession. The WNBA doesn't need to copy-paste the NBA's exact L2M format, but it does need a public, time-stamped explanation mechanism for the final 2 minutes of one-score games, especially in the playoffs. This series deserved to be remembered for defensive mastery, for unlikely heroes, for a city's first pro basketball ring in decades. Instead, we're here, archiving broadcast angles to reverse engineer certainty the league chose not to provide. So what do we take away? On the floor, the sequence is teachable. Establish early, jump straight up, live with contact. In the replay center, the bar for overturn should be real, not rhetorical. In the league office, the cost of not telling people what happened is higher than ever. Fans aren't asking for perfection, they're asking for a receipt. This time, the receipt was a scoreboard and a quote at a press conference. That's not enough for a sport trying to turn record-breaking interest into durable trust. The finals ended on a whistle that could have gone the other way without breaking the game's integrity. Without transparency, that whistle becomes a legend. And legends, good or bad, are how reputations get made. Here's the insider takeaway. You can't control a whistle, but you can control a system. If the WNBA wants its biggest nights to be remembered for greatness instead of gray areas, it needs to lower the temperature around officiating by raising the light, publish the audits, explain the calls, and let the basketball breathe. If you want the rest of the story, the part where money, power, and policies shape the product you see, go watch our Locker Room Confidential playlist next. That's where we trace how leagues decide what the public gets to know, and why it always shows up in the last 2 minutes.